Hello again, and welcome back to Illegally Sighted. This is Jesse, and I am back for another episode of Growing Up Illegally Sighted. And boy, I really hope this video records this time. I've actually recorded this twice, and OBS has crapped itself twice at different points during the recording, and I don't know why. Thankfully, there was an OBS update, so I'm hoping to God that fixed it. But this time, the last couple videos that I've recorded, we've been talking about education, high school, grade school, high school, transition, college. Now we're going to move on to real life. We're going to move on to the fun stuff, employment. And I really wanted to do a video about this, and I really like the way the last one went, so I'm really bummed that that didn't work out well. But hopefully we're better now, I hope. So let's dive right into it here. Again, I want to talk about some of my experiences throughout my journey to get to employment, because it's been a rough one. There's been good times, bad times, and horrible times, and everything in between. Learned a lot. Hopefully, hearing about some of my experiences, some of what I tried to do to fix things, some of the mistakes I made. And just even some things from friends of mine that I've learned. I hope this video helps people so that you guys don't have to go through some of the crap that I did. So here we go. When I grew up on a farm in the middle of nowhere. So I really didn't have much in the way of, like, I wasn't working in towns or anything like that, any jobs like that during high school. But since I was really young, I worked on our family farm, and we did a lot of stuff. We had animals. When I was really young, we had pigs for a little while. We had sheep. We had eventually got rid of all that, and we had cows then later on. So it was, feeding, watering, pitching hay to the animals. We had chickens for a few years, so feeding and watering them, cleaning up the pens. Oh yeah, that was a fun job, but we had to do it. We had pheasants for a year or two. Those were a real pain because you had to be careful because they could get away on you. Because they were birds that could actually fly. So I did a lot of working with animals. Had regular household and farm chores. We had several gardens on our farm. Planted, grew, weeded, picked vegetables, green beans, carrots, peas, corn, whatever, doing all that stuff. Watering, mowed a whole bunch of lawns in my day. And unfortunately, we rarely had a working riding mower, so guess what? Guess who got to do push mowing all year, all summer long? Me. And like I said, this was no city plot. This was no little town yard. This is a yard that took a day and a half or so to mow fully. If you were lucky, you had a break for a day or two, and then you had to start all over again. In addition to that, we had my grandpa, we had a family friend, my brother and I mowed their lawns to earn some extra money. So we were working constantly, mowing lawn, doing the animal stuff, doing the yard stuff. We grew vegetables. We grew a ton of potatoes, so we had them over the winter. And we had extra usually, so we would sell some potatoes. We had a sign at the end of our driveway. People would come in, and we would we'd weigh the potatoes, and if they wanted 3 pounds, 5 pounds, whatever. So we got to learn all that kind of stuff, and it was a lot of manual labor, a lot of hard work, and you learned a lot. So even throughout high school, like, I didn't work in like a retail or a grocery store or any other type of job like that really, but I did work my butt off on the farm. And I really do think, let's say, I'm going to use technology as an example. I think there is value, especially paying your dues, doing your time, and maybe having your first job or two, get that traditional summer job, work in retail, grocery store, work in a, um, work in something that's outside of what you want to do, because you're getting work experience. You're learning about, being on time, responsibility, taking orders, advocating for yourself. You're learning a lot of these different soft skills, and hopefully you're earning a little bit of money to boot. But everybody, if you're non-disabled or whatever, a lot of people have, crap jobs, or temporary jobs, part-time jobs when they're in high school or college. They get a summer job or an evening job. That is absolutely worth doing. Build your resume and build it as early as you can, because we're going to need it. When I graduated high school, I moved out right away, almost right away, and I went to college. And, I started in one college, transferred halfway through to another one. But while I was in both universities, I had different types of jobs. In the first college, I worked. We were right across our dorm was right across the parking lot from the School for the Blind. So I did some work there doing audio and videotape transcribing. Listen to the audio, type it down so that they had like a script that they could write, or if you had somebody who was deaf or hearing impaired, they could read what was being said. I scanned in books and textbooks, using, I think it was Kurzweil at the time. They would have books that they needed to prepare for people, and so I would scan them in, make sure that accuracy was at least really high. So I scanned in textbooks. Then I worked at the campus housing office. They needed somebody to help update their website, so that was my first experience really doing web design. Not so much web design, but more web updating. So if they had updated news or information, or needed to change something, I would do that. And that was an interesting job, because a lot of that was fighting with the software they were using was not the most screen reader friendly. I was using JAWS at the time, and so it was a lot of fighting with JAWS as much as it was actually doing the work. But I learned a lot from the experience. I had some success, but I had some trouble. And yeah, I learned a lot with that job. Then I moved on to, I worked at the Disability Services Office. And they wanted me to experiment with a few basic website layouts and things. So I was trying to build a website for them that they could use. So I got a little more experience there. But then I also taught a couple of college students some assistive technology. We had a low vision person, we had a student, we had a JAWS student, and I was helping to help them learn their screen reader, their Zoom text program, helping them so I can check my school email, I can communicate with my instructors. They were just starting to have some websites and stuff online, being able to do research, look up information. So that was my first experience with starting to teach people things. So I did that. And then once I transferred, I got some school jobs there as well. And I worked at the Instructional Technology Center, which was kind of an office. They would help some students, but it was really geared toward faculty, staff, and instructors. And we really, we were the first laptop university. And so everyone, instructor, staff, students, everybody had a laptop, everybody had internet access. We had email, we had shared printers, we were starting to use things like WebCT and Blackboard, learning management systems. They're everywhere now. They're common. They're used in grade school, high school, college. But back then, we were way ahead of the curve, man. We were doing it. And so, our office would help people that were trying to get their courses, their course materials online, all that kind of stuff. And then on top of that, as different departments were updating their websites, I was part of the team that would, so I went in and I would explore their current websites and give them written feedback. I would test it for accessibility. So screen reader accessibility, how well did it work with a screen reader like JAWS? Low vision friendly, like was the text really too small? Was the contrast bad? Thinking about other things like, oh, well, these buttons are really small and close together. If someone has a dexterity mobility impairment, are they going to be able to use this interface? Um, is the website organized well enough to where when I'm looking for something, I can find it and not have to be going in circles trying to figure out what I'm looking for? Because that can still happen on websites today. There's still some horrible websites out there. So that was some of my first experience with actual technology accessibility kind of reporting consulting work. I enjoyed that. And then there was a instructor that I'd taken like math and science classes with, and he was a cool dude. Him and another guy created this software that was used throughout campus for a lot of the math and science classes where instead of using a textbook or using a website, they had this little program that had these modules in it. You'd log in, and then you would go to your unit and you would go into and just do all of your problems, your math problems, solve your equations, your physics, your algebra equations, whatever. You would solve those right in this program. And they wanted a help system for it. So I would create, and then they had another little website as well. So with some tools in it. So I wrote the documentation for that. By that point, I was starting to um, take some classes for my technical communication minor. And so that was really good experience for that type of thing as well. Not only did I write the content for their help system, I wrote their entire documentation, but I also learned how to use, I believe it was called HTML help. And when you hit F1 in Windows and it brings up that little interface where you can, it brings up that interface where like it has the table of contents or the topics sections on the left and then your body of text on the right. I learned how to build that type of self-contained help system, and that was kind of a cool thing. I'm like, oh, that's really cool. Now instead of having a bunch of separate documents, I've got this one little help file, and people can open it and read it for that program. So I had a good variety of experiences, and I also did a little bit, not a whole lot, but I did a little bit of training after I transferred at that second university. I did some training with students, helped them with some assistive technology, a little bit of Magic and Zoom Text and JAWS, that kind of a thing. So again, a little bit of kind of instructional type of stuff. Gave a few presentations to students and staff on accessibility. So like I said, a lot of variety in my work experience. So up to that point, things were going pretty well. I was had all kinds of different jobs, a lot of manual labor growing up. I really started to get into doing the geeky stuff in college. More technology, web design, training, consulting, all the kind of stuff that I was getting good at. And I will say, if you are, take advantage, if you have an opportunity to get that after school or summer or high school job, do it. Take advantage of it. Job experience is worth it. In college, if you have the opportunity, get a job while you're in college. Maybe you take it after classes in the evening. Maybe the nice thing about college jobs, especially if you get one that's on campus, they know that you're there to be a student. They know that you're there to get a degree. And if you do that, if you get a job through them, they will often really be able to help accommodate you and work around your schedule. Oh, I've got classes Monday and Wednesday, Friday, but I'm pretty open Tuesday, Thursday afternoons, or maybe I can work in the mornings on these days. And they can also, they can work with not just you, but other students who also have to work around their schedules. So, that you're never going to have more of a flexibility than you do with a on-campus college job, because like I said, they know that you're there. They have work study positions. So you're doing a job that's related to your field. Like if I'm in technology, I might get something in an office. I might get, like I said, the ITC job that I had where we were helping students and faculty. Um, well worth doing because you want to have more than just your resume. If you have the opportunity to be in any extracurricular activities in college, I was in a computer club for a couple of years and we, did a few things in there. We had meetings and a couple LAN parties and things. And one year we went to the Consumer Electronics Show. That was a cool experience. So I had that on my resume. I just, anything you can put on there, the better. Because they're looking for not just education, they're looking for actual work experience. And getting that first job is really hard, especially when, if you've never had a job before, and even entry level positions are like, oh, well, we're requiring X number of position or X number of years work experience. Well, if every job is requiring work experience, how do we get the work experience? It's this kind of catch 22. So, get those. And even if you have to volunteer, maybe you volunteer work in a department on your university. You're still getting the experience. Maybe it turns into a job. But it's still, if you're getting 10, 20 hours a week, that's still something. That's still you're building your resume. Don't overlook that. So up to this point, like I said, things were looking pretty good. I got my IT degree. I got my scientific and technical communication minor. Okay, we got this. I've got work experience, a variety of it. I'm feeling pretty good. I graduate college with my undergrad. I get my first apartment. And I start looking for work. That's where things took a dive. So for the next 3.5 years, I was unemployed. I could not find work. It was not for lack of trying. The next piece of advice that I will give you, if you are looking for work, treat that job search process as a full-time job in itself. Don't just half-ass it. Don't put just half effort into it. Treat it like a full-time job in itself. Dedicate several hours a day to it. I would build several resumes and cover letters because I wasn't just applying for one type of job. I would look for web design, technical writing, help desk, IT work, support, assistive technology work, accessibility work, assistive technology training work. How many things have I rattled off? Over a half a dozen? 10 things? So I had resumes that were tailored for all of those types of jobs, and same with cover letters, because you don't want to just submit the one blanket resume for everything, especially nowadays when you have to get through the automated process. You submit a resume online to somewhere, and before you even get a human to look at your resume, there's an automated screening process to where they're looking for certain keywords that are in that position description that you're applying for. And if you don't even match some of those, no matter how qualified you are, and if you're just submitting a generic resume, you're not getting through. And you're not even getting that human attention that you're hoping for. So it's even more important now to really make sure you're doing those resumes and cover letters for what you're actually applying for. And because I was applying for so many, it quickly got overwhelming and it was so hard to keep track of. I created an Excel document. And it was detailed. I had what employer or what business was I applying to? What was the name of the employer? What was the name of the position I applied for? When did I submit my application, my resume? If I was able to get in contact with somebody via phone or email, who was it? If I had their information, what was their phone number? What was their email? When did they get back to me? Did I get a phone interview? Did I get a in-person interview? When and did I send a thank you letter for an interview? Thanking them for the opportunity to interview and that I'm still interested in their position. So based on all of that information, when can I follow up? If I applied but I haven't received any callback for an interview, could I check with them to say, hey, do you still have this position open? Am I missing any information? Do you have any questions? I'm still interested in this position, um, and I'm open to an interview. If I got an interview and I hadn't heard anything for a couple of weeks, checking when can I check back in with them and say, hey, thank you for the interview. I'm still interested. If you have any other questions or need any information, let me know. I'm still interested, and please let me know when you fill the position. I kept track of all of that information because I really had to. Like I said, if you're applying for dozens of jobs a week, you have to. And I was. And the interesting thing was, I was getting phone interviews. I even got several in-person interviews, local. I got, there were ones where I had to travel a little bit for. There were a couple of interviews where the companies actually flew me out for an in-person interview. They paid to fly me out there. So I remember I applied for a technical writing job at Freedom Scientific at the time. I was gonna, all of their help documentation that they now have, I was gonna be one of the team that wrote those things. I got flown out to a position at the University of Washington to work in their disability services office. Didn't get either one of those jobs, but at least I got, hey, they were interested enough to fly me out there. But that was the problem, is I thought I was qualified. I had my degree. I had work experience. I was doing what I was supposed to with my resumes and cover letters, my follow-ups. And so, a few months into the job search, I'm like, okay, something's not working. Let me go back to my college here that I graduated, and I went to their career center and I said, hey, can you look over my resume here? And is there anything wrong with it? Is there anything that I should change or improve? I made a few tweaks and got a couple of their suggestions. And then I also said, hey, I'm getting to the interview stage, but I'm never getting the jobs. So can I do a mock interview or two? I did a couple of mock interviews to see if there was something in my interview process that wasn't going well. Not just, it could be anything from my physical, like the way I dressed when I came in, my I don't know, my demeanor, my posture, my attitude, the way I answered questions. I mean, I wanted to know, if there was something I was doing poorly or I was doing wrong, let me know, because clearly I'm getting interviews, but no one wants to hire me. I ironed out a couple things there, and overall, people thought I did good. They thought I did well. So I don't know. I guess I just keep applying for work. And about a year and a half or so in, I ran into another problem. When I would get interviews, the interviewer would always ask me, well, hey, I see you graduated in 2003. But you don't have anything on your resume since. What have you been doing over the past year and a half, 2 years? And an employer is looking for recent activity, recent employment, recent work. I didn't have that, but it wasn't for lack of trying. Like I said, I told them I was applying for jobs. I was applying for work. I was applying for jobs every day. And I want to work. I'm willing to work. I'm good at what I do. If you hire me, I will do the job well, and what I don't know, I'm willing to learn. Um, and I still didn't get the work. Around that time, like the first few months, after the first few months, I started doing something else too. And I would also recommend this if especially if you have a visible disability. If you show up to an interview and you haven't disclosed your disability, if you show up and you have a wheelchair or you have a white cane or a guide dog, it's pretty obvious that you have some sort of a disability. And, I know there's even for if you have an invisible disability, I don't have any experience with that. But I can only imagine that's got to be its own tricky situation. But if you have that even fairly obvious disability where they're going to notice when you get that interview, we have the ADA, we have the Americans with Disabilities Act. They can't ask you certain questions. They should not discriminate against you due to your disability. But, even though they can't ask those questions, those questions are going through their head. They have concerns. They've heard stereotypes. They have misconceptions. They have low expectations of people with disabilities. They're wondering about what if this person gets hurt? They're a liability. How much money are we going to have to fork over for accommodations just so that person can do their job? I mean, I've heard all of these types of questions before. And so even if they're not saying it, they're thinking it. And I would argue it's in your best interest to get in front of some of that. And so what I started to do is I would bring my laptop to the interview. Now, we didn't have iPhones, we didn't have iPads, we didn't have even Windows mobile phones back then. And so I brought my laptop, and I had JAWS on there, and I had some documents that I could work with. I had everything set up for my email and internet. So during that interview, we would go through the interview, we'd go through their questions. I would ask questions about the job, the company, the position, any other things that I had. But then I would get out there and I would say, hey, I know that I have a disability. I know that you know I have a disability. And you may be wondering how I can do the job or have concerns. If you have any questions, I give you permission to ask. It's not a problem. If you have any questions about the technology that I use to do my job, I have my laptop here. I can show you the assistive technology that I use. Like, if you want to see how I write and edit documents, if you want to see how I do email, if you want to see how I look something up on the internet and do research, whatever, let me know. I'll bring out my laptop and I'll show you. And I did that. I did do that a few times because some people were curious. That can help. I mean, that can alleviate some of their uncertainty, I guess, if you will. And even after doing that, I still wasn't getting the job. So again, a year and a half, that's where I think it really started. I was getting really frustrated. I was getting frustrated. I was getting angry. I was getting depressed. I was applying for dozens of jobs. I was applying for hundreds of jobs eventually, and I'm not exaggerating. I was getting phone interviews. I was getting in-person interviews. I was not getting the jobs. And I got so many rejection letters in the mail. Back then, they would actually send you paper rejection letters. And the joke is that I was saying that, I got so many of these, I could wallpaper my apartment with them. And again, I'm not even exaggerating. You might think I'm trying to be funny. And I kind of played it off as a joke because that's all you can do is laugh or get angry. But I, just try to play it off and like, yeah, I could wallpaper my apartment with as many rejection letters as I got. And I probably could have. And so, when I first moved into my apartment after graduation, I lived alone for a couple months. And then a friend of mine who was still in college, a little bit younger than I was, he decided not to live in the dorms, and we decided to be roommates. He was part of my crew, my group that we were running with in college. So he was my roommate, and so that was fun because we were friends, and that was fine. But it also helped me out considerably because then I could pay half the rent, half the utilities. We split everything down the middle. And then another friend of mine that we were friends with in college that was part of our crew. He had a job on the edge of town, and so he moved in with us for a year or two. And so now we were splitting the rent and the bills three ways, rent and utilities and groceries and all that. So if it wasn't for that, I would have been even more screwed than I was. As it was, I was still flat broke. I was struggling to the point where I was using credit cards to pay monthly utility bills because if I didn't, I really had to choose, do I eat this month or do I pay a bill? Or, I have five bills. Which bill do I pay this month and which do I let slide and probably pay a late fee next month? And I couldn't go back. My parents offered, they said, well, hey, you're having so much trouble. You can come home and live with us until you find work. And I thanked them and I said, I appreciate it, but I really can't because you guys live in the middle of nowhere and you work, mom, you work, dad works. And if I have to go somewhere for an interview, who's going to drive me? If you live in the middle of nowhere, I can't drive. I'm kind of screwed. I'm stuck. So I had to be somewhere where I could get public transportation, or I had to be somewhere where I had more friends and connections to where I might be able to get some help. So I stayed in my apartment. I had the roommates. Um, but like I said, about a year and a half in or so, I was starting to get really depressed. I was frustrated. I was angry. You can only be told you're a failure so many times. You can only be rejected so many dozens of times, so many hundreds of times before you really start to reflect on yourself and go, am I stupid? Am I worthless? Am I ever going to find a job? Um, I feel like I've been doing everything I can to improve myself, and that still isn't helping. I was not a pleasant person to be around. I even remember, one of my roommates was like, "Dude, you really gotta do something because you really gotta. You're even annoying me a little bit." And then I talked to them a little bit later once I was out of everything. It's like, yeah, you were not the funnest person to be around for a while, and I acknowledged. I said, "Yeah, I'm sorry. I know I wasn't. Um, I was a miserable prick for a while." But it was, like I said, you can only be told that you're a failure so many dozens or hundred times before you start to believe it. Um, it was hard. It was very rough. Of course, didn't go to any doctors or any like treatment or anything, but I was probably clinically depressed for a while there. I was not a happy camper. So, about 3 years in, again, people are asking me, well, what have you been doing for the last 2, 3 years? Looking for work. When I graduated college, I didn't want to go get my master's. I wasn't opposed to it, but I wanted to work. I wanted to start earning a living. I wanted to um, start earning my living, getting a paycheck. All this time when I was in college and during that time, in addition to having roommates, I was living off of SSI. Yeah, I had SSI for quite a while. And I'm thankful it was there. If I didn't have that, I would have been even more screwed. However, and I know this isn't going to be popular to some people, it's going to probably piss some people off, but I'm okay with that. Um, you know, as much as I'm into technology accessibility, game accessibility, that kind of a thing, one of my other passions is seeing people with disabilities succeed and having them become a productive employed member of society. You know, I understand there are some disabilities. If you are severely disabled enough to where you have multiple disabilities, or you have so much fatigue or chronic illness, or maybe you get seizures a ton, so like you can't really hold down like a regular shift job. I get that, and you know that's what these type of Medicaid and SSI and all these things are for. But I would argue if you are just blind or visually impaired or even deaf, or you know, you only have really one thing to deal with, especially if you, when you were in high school, when you were in college, you got some adjustment to blindness training, you learned some technology, you learned your O&M skills, you learned how to live on your own, cooking, cleaning, travel, all that stuff. Your eyes may not work as well or at all, but your mind works. The rest of your body works. We may do some tasks a little bit differently. We may do some things tactily or audibly, but we can still do them. And I would argue that not only can we, but we should be expected. It should be an expectation that we work, that we contribute, that we become a productive member of society. We support ourselves, we support our family, we earn a paycheck, we pay taxes just like everybody else. No one else likes paying taxes, but guess what? We should have to do it too. You know, people always say, I have a disability, I want to be treated equal just like everybody else. No, what a lot of people end up kind of meaning is, no, I want all the benefits and entitlements thereof, but when it comes to handouts and freebies and, you know, taking advantage of certain things, like they want the benefits, but they don't want the responsibility. And no, you got to take the good with the bad, man. I mean, every other, non-disabled person has to work for their keep. And really, again, unless, like I said, I understand there are situations where people can't hold a traditional job, and I have no problem with that. I respect that. And that's what these services are for. And they're not meant for you to. It's not meant for like SSI to be your career. For the rest of your life. That's not what it's for. And even if you could, what you get is you can't make a living on SSI alone. Even back in the day, 20 years ago, you couldn't. Now you sure can't. If I lived on SSI now, I couldn't even pay probably more than half of my rent, let alone any food or utilities or other bills. And on top of that, if you get government benefits, then you got to get other government benefits. You might have to get subsidized housing. You might have to get EBT or food stamps. You may have to be on God knows what other types of programs. And there's like keeping up with half of that. Like I remember when I was on SSI, it was miserable because, one month they would overpay you, then they would underpay you, then they would want you to like, oh, you get a letter in the mail saying you owe a couple $1,000s. I'm like hell I do. I reported everything that I was supposed to. So you have to check in, you have to report regularly. You can't make more than an X amount of money, so you can't even try to get ahead. I get it. Some people, maybe they're doing it because they need the Medicaid. They have really specific, very expensive ongoing medical needs and costs. I get that. Our medical system is so screwed up right now. Like the amount that a simple doctor's visit costs or medication costs, and that's even if your insurance will approve that type of treatment or medication. That's a whole other topic I'm not even going to talk about. But like, so I get that, you need to be on Medicaid for your disability. Like there's certain reasons, sure. But like I said, if you have like just blindness or low vision, We can and should be expected to work. That's just my humble opinion. And I know I've gotten into real life disagreements about that, and that's fair. I know, I know friends and others that have really not found that opinion to be very popular, and it is what it is. But like I said, I want to be just like everybody else. That's my thing. And when I went through this period of time, this 3.5 year period of unemployment where I was less than broke. I was in the hole. And once I got my first job again, I said, from that point on, that was my vow. And I have been adamant about it ever since. I am never, if I can help it, I'm never going on SSI ever again. I'm never being that broke ever again. I'm never living that miserably, that poor ever again. I don't want to have to worry every week if I can have a home, if I can have electricity, if I can eat that week. I don't want to have to live that way ever again. Yeah, when I get to retirement age and I am eligible for retirement benefits and Social Security, SSDI, or whatever it is, that's different. That's its own thing. But like, if I'm able to, support myself and work, I'm going to do it because I never want to live that way again. It was very hard. It was demoralizing. It was humiliating. It was depressing. It was hard. So after that, about 3 years in, I said, okay, I have to do something. So I learned about this master's degree program at the original university that I started college in, and this was in instructional design. So I said, okay, I'm going to do that. And I signed up. I started distance classes for instructional design. I figured, hey, if this IT thing isn't working, I will. I'm good at writing now. I can teach. I can write curriculum. Maybe there's a field in there that I can do. So I started that master's program, and about a semester in, I learned about this AmeriCorps position, and it was kind of a unique AmeriCorps position because it was in St. Paul, and there was this program called CTEP, the Community Technology Empowerment Project, and it was a technology focused volunteer experience because AmeriCorps is volunteer based. You get a living stipend, but again, even if you're not disabled, you're not getting rich. You're barely making ends meet. It's a volunteer position. You're getting barely enough to live, and there you go. Um, but I worked at a couple of public libraries for that year. If you're in AmeriCorps, you have like 1 or 2 years that you can do service. And then sometimes if you want to become like a mentor or a leader, you might get a third year out of it. But I knew this wasn't going to be a permanent gig either. So I'm still going to college. I'm getting my master's, so I have something to fall back on. I'm working full time through AmeriCorps, and I am looking for work. I'm still doing the job search because this isn't permanent. And in those jobs, I worked at these libraries. They had a computer workstation that had assistive technology like ZoomText, JAWS, and Dragon on them. They needed people. They wanted people to know that computer existed because no one was really using those computers, but they made them available at their branches. So I had to try to find a way to get the word out there so that patrons could come in, and if they needed assistive technology access, they had it. And if we did get patrons coming in, I would teach them, I would show them the technology that was there. I would help them get set up with it. I would maybe show them a little bit of how to use it. So the first few times they come in, I might help them through some tasks they wanted to do. Then I also, some people came in and we would train for like an hour at a time. And I would teach people JAWS. I would teach people Zoom text. And so I did some technology training, and that was a great job experience. Um, and then I just kind of generally helped out other library customers and patrons that were doing some technology stuff. So it was a pretty busy, busy thing. And then several months into that job, I learned about a position that was open in a nonprofit in Florida, and it was for an assistive technology instructor position. They had just gotten a technology grant, and they were opening a new computer lab. And so one of my first jobs there is um, they got new computers and scanners and printers and CCTVs, braille displays, other hardware. They got, software, like JAWS and Zoom Text and Magic and Kurzweil and OpenBook, all that stuff. So we set up the lab and got it ready for the grand opening. And we had people that were doing tours. We worked a lot. We worked a little bit with high school students or college students, and we worked a little bit with working age adults. But where I worked, it was on this campus. There was the Division of Blind Services, which was the VR agency. There was our office and our computer lab. There was a residential training center where people stayed and they learned all the blindness skills, their O&M and tech, and so that's where a lot of the, college and working age people went. We worked a lot with senior citizens. And at first I wasn't sure how that was going to go. I wasn't sure if I would like that, but it turns out I really did. And the thing that I really liked about working with seniors is when they were there, if you were younger and you grew up with the technology, you kind of had a little, you were used to it. You had a little bit of entitlement. I'm like, oh, I want this, I want that, I want this, I want that. Um, and you had things provided to you, and so you kind of took some things for granted a little bit. I mean, I would do that, a time or two, once I started getting access to some of the technology. Like if I could go back and say, yeah, I maybe would have taken more advantage of this opportunity back then had I taken it more seriously. But when I was teaching seniors, I was teaching them again JAWS, Zoom Text, Kurzweil, CCTVs, and when they were there because they wanted to be. They were there because they wanted, just like when I was going through my rough patch of being unemployed. They felt like they were losing some of their dignity. They didn't want to have to rely and feel like they were a burden to family members as they were getting older. They wanted to live independently. They wanted to support themselves. They wanted to continue doing the things that they had when they had their vision. A lot of people had macular degeneration that were coming in, so they were losing some of their vision. And so they wanted to read their mail. They wanted to write letters to people. They were doing email. They wanted to continue doing that. Look up hobbies or information on the internet. And, you teach them even just something simple. And they were so grateful for it. It was just a really fun, I met so many interesting people through the customers that we had, the clients that we had, students that we had at this training lab. And then we would also just get people in who wanted a tour of the lab and to see what technology was out there. Maybe, you had worked all your life and you're starting to lose your vision and you do want like a CCTV so you can read better again. You can read your newspaper, your mail again. And so I would show them, I would show them desktop CCTVs, handheld CCTVs. I would show them Zoom text. I would show them JAWS so they could see, oh, if you need to use a computer, you still can, and we can help you learn it. We helped VA. We helped veterans. It was fun working with a lot of those guys. There's just a lot of, I really liked working with a lot of people that I got to meet at that job. And I did the technology training. And a couple months in, my supervisor comes up to me and she goes, I know, I remember you saying that you know Braille, right? Yeah. Well, we don't have any staff that really teach Braille right now, but we have a guy that wants to learn some basic Braille so he can read elevator signs and maybe do some labeling around his home. Would you be able to teach this person some basic Braille? I'm like, yeah, I guess. I've never done it before, but that doesn't mean I can't. I think that I could probably wing it and figure it out. And so, in addition to teaching technology, I learned how to teach Braille. We didn't really have a curriculum. I just pulled everything out of my butt and just figured it out on the fly. And I taught not only him, but I would say probably 3 to 5 students over those couple year period. I taught some of them grade 1 Braille. I also taught some of them up through grade 2 Braille. Um, so I did that. And then there was a thing where, like, I had a friend of mine who got hired there. He got laid off. My supervisor that I had, I loved working with her. She got laid off a little over halfway through. She went through some stuff and then she got laid off. And there was a fair bit of turnover at that while I was there. And I was, seeing a few people that I knew, you're all good one day and then poof, you get laid off. Um, I was scared that was going to happen to me. And remember, I made this vow. I'm like, I do not want to be in a situation where I don't have a job. And here's my next piece of advice. If you already have a job, if you are working, and for whatever reason it's not right for you, maybe it's not as accessible as it maybe could be, maybe you don't like your manager, maybe you don't like the environment of your coworkers or something, especially if you have a disability, for the love of God, do not quit. If at all possible, do not quit your current job until you have an official offer at a new job. Because what happens if you quit and you run into a situation where you're unemployed for 1, 2, 3+ years? You don't want to be in that situation again. So, like I said, I know not everyone loves the jobs that they're in, and you can absolutely have the freedom to look while you're still working. But if at all possible, please don't quit your job until you have another one. Um, Again, especially because if you have a disability, it's not fair, but it's kind of the reality. We have to work twice, 3, 4 times as hard to be thought half as equal. Yes, people aren't supposed to discriminate. Yes, we have the ADA. Yes, things have gotten a lot better in some ways, but as myself and my experiences can verify, and other friends that I've worked with or that I know you thought my story so far has been rough. I've got a couple friends who have been through situations just as rough as that, if not worse, and they've gone through even more crap than I have to become employed. So it's, the challenge is real, people. It sucks. And you might be one of the lucky ones. Maybe you get your degree or whatever and you apply for a few jobs and poof, within the first couple of months you get a job. Congratulations, kudos. You're one of the lucky ones. And if you are, I'm jealous and I kind of hate you just a little because it was so hard to get that first job. And that's why I say if you have one and you're not happy with it, stick with it and look for something else, because you don't want to end up in that situation I was in. And many of my friends and many of my people, many other people that I know have been in. So I found out about this job when I was working in Florida. I'm like, well, I'm going to keep my ear to the ground and see if there's anything just in case I get laid off one day myself. I heard about this assistive technology specialist job up in Minnesota, and I applied for it. And I thought, well, I'm so far away. I'm halfway across the country at this point. They probably have someone already in mind. They want to hire somebody local, but they have to advertise. I knew I was qualified for it, but I wasn't, I'm so used to failure at this point. I'm lucky I got the job or two that I had, is the way I was thinking. But I applied, and I got a phone interview, and because I was halfway across the country, I think it was because I actually nailed the phone interview that they didn't even really, I didn't even have to do an in-person interview, and I got the job. Um, and when I was working in AmeriCorps, I also attended some events and product demonstrations and stuff at SSB, State Services for the Blind, where I'm at now. And so a couple of people sort of knew me or knew of me a little bit. That maybe helped. But literally, I want to tell you about this interview because, most interviews you get your, what are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? What can you bring to this company? Tell me about yourself. Tell me about a time you had a conflict, or, how did you address this? All these standard interview questions that you get. We had a few of those. But literally, this interview was a technical exam. It was over 50, I don't remember how many it was now, but it was over 50 questions. It was anything from tell me about this feature of this assistive technology. What are the differences between this and that technology? What are some common keyboard commands? What is the keyboard command to do this or to get this information? And then there was because a lot of us, we also did like some troubleshooting and tech support type of stuff and setup of machines for people. So it's we had like a lot of support type of questions of oh, what if, how would you solve or how would you fix this problem? Or I remember one of the questions was you get an error on your screen, NTLDR is not found. What's wrong? What do you do? Well, that means your installation of Windows is hosed, and you get to reinstall your operating system, is what that means. So it was stuff like that. It was a lot of technical questions. It was like I said, literally an exam. And they did have the only trouble that I had was around that time VoiceOver for the Mac was just starting to become a thing. It had literally just come out in the last year or two, tops. And I didn't have access to a Mac. Our agency didn't have a Mac yet. And I knew of VoiceOver. I knew conceptually what it kind of could do, but I didn't know it like I did JAWS or Zoom Text or stuff like that. So if they asked me about commands for reading or commands for whatever, I didn't know them because I hadn't used it. I could tell them what I knew about VoiceOver, that I knew it existed, I knew what it was, I knew what it did, but beyond that I really didn't know because I didn't have any experience. Other than that, I aced that sucker, man. And it was funny because once I got hired and I got to know the other, we had we have a few of us there that are AT specialists. And I was talking to a couple of the guys once we got to know each other a little bit, and they're like, yeah, God, when you did that interview, you were so far ahead of anyone else that applied. There were other people that were, you could tell they were trying to Google the answers because they didn't know. There were people that were, when they called them to schedule the interview, they're like, well, can I have the interview questions advanced so I can study? I'm like, no, that's not how interviews work. You're supposed to be prepared for the job. There are qualifications for a reason, yeah, there'll be little bits of the job that you'll need some specific training on, but those are really job specific things. If you're there to be a technology specialist or a technology trainer, you should probably know that technology. And like I said, other than those other than those Mac questions, I nailed that thing. And when I got off the phone with that interview, I'm like, I know they don't have to hire me, but damn, if they don't, what are they doing? Because I am so qualified for this job. I freaking nailed that interview. And, I'm sure there are other people that are just as qualified as I was, but I had to think that had to be in the top running for that, and I was. And shortly thereafter, I got the phone call. They offered me the job. And so I put in my notice at my AT trainer job in Florida, and I moved back up to Minnesota. And I have been working here ever since. I've been working here for over 13 years, and my job has changed a little bit. I worked with mainly adults before, but now I'm kind of focused on working with transition age students. So it's a lot of similarities, but there are some differences. I work a lot more with students than I do people at the stage of their life when they're looking for work. But I do still a little bit of that as well, and I just try to help however I can. But I work with students a lot now, and now I don't just have a job, I have a career. There's a difference. A job is just something you get to pay the bills, to support yourself. You get that summer job to earn a little bit of money, whatever. You take what you can, where you can, when you can. Now I have a career. It's something that I can do for the rest of my life. It's something that I can, I know that I'm really good at assistive technology work, accessibility work, and that is my career. Once I started YouTube, all this time when I was in Florida, and even about a year when I was up here in Minnesota again, I was still doing my master's program because I wanted to have that other thing to fall back on should something go haywire. Because again, remember that vow, that commitment that I made. I'm never going back to living like that again. So I finally got done with that, and then I started this YouTube thing in 2012. And again, like I said in that video, I can't tell you the number of opportunities that has afforded me. And now not only do I have a primary career in assistive technology and voc rehab and accessibility, I have a secondary freelance career as well now. And I have kind of reached my childhood dream. I always wanted to be in the video game industry. I always wanted to be somehow associated with making video games, or something related to video game industry. And I've gotten paid enough. I've had paid gigs, consulting gigs, presentation gigs, interview gig, just a lot of different things. I've worked with indie developers, app developers, game developers, Microsoft, a few AAA developers. And I can say that I also have a secondary career now in game accessibility advocacy and consulting. And I'm not going to lie, after the hell that I went through to get here, I'm proud of that. I'm quite proud of that, actually. I'm doing in both jobs largely what I love. I have a couple of my main passions that I'm able to work in. Both, getting people out there, getting on the education and employment side, that is hugely important to me, as you've heard. You know that I'm into game and technology accessibility, if nothing else, through all the stuff I do on the channel and everything. And yeah, like I said, I'm supporting myself. I've been living on my own independently for over 20 years, despite what people think people with disabilities can or cannot do, despite people's low expectations and assumptions and misconceptions and stereotypes that people have about blind people or visually impaired people or people with disabilities. I am no longer in debt. I got out of my credit card debt. I'm saving money. I'm still able to buy some fun things and luxury. I'm able to pay my bills. I don't have to worry right now what I'm going to do week to week, month to month, day to day. like I said, I'm saving up. I have a retirement plan that I'm contributing to through work. Several years ago now, I have a Roth IRA now that I have, so I'm initially saving some extra money there. I'm saving money in general, and like I said, I'm not going back to living that way ever again. Um, that was some of the roughest years of my life. I mean, it was fun because I had my friends there, my roommates there, but at the same time, it was some of the hardest, most, like I said, humiliating, um, demoralizing days of my life because I just, no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't succeed. And like I said, that's the other thing that you have, like I said, is not fair at all. And it's so easy to give up. There were many times where I wanted to give up. I'm like, well, you know what? I guess I'm just going to be miserable. I'm going to be worthless. I'm going to just sit here and barely make out a living and collect my SSI every month and say, F it. But I didn't. I'm like, I can't do this. I got to keep going. I got to keep trying. So, find people that around you that can help you. Find people that can support you, that can give you sanity. Even if you're struggling, find something that you love to do. Play music, play games, read something. I mean, it was literally to the point where, like you said, when I wasn't doing the job search, I love playing video games, but I couldn't even play video games anymore because any free time I had, I got tired of reading. I wasn't even enjoying video games anymore because it's just the rest of my life was just bringing me down so hard that I didn't even enjoy games anymore. I didn't enjoy movies anymore. I didn't enjoy a lot of the things I liked. Like I said, I'm sure it was miserable to be around me for a couple of years. And I apologize to the people that I made miserable because, yeah, it was rough. But like I said, it's not fair that we have to put in so much extra effort, but I will say it is worth it. You have to prevail eventually because, like I said, you can't live on SSI the rest of your life. It's no way to live. Um, you have to have so many other services on top of that, and it's just this. There's so much work to even just remain on these services that I swear to God, having a job is much easier than dealing with all those social services. I'm not lying. It's easier. My job, the duties that I have to do for work, is easier than maintaining all that garbage. I'm glad it's there for the people that need it, and even for the people that need it temporarily. But I was when I moved to Florida and I learned that I was making enough, and they're like, "Well, you're no longer eligible." I'm like, "See ya." I was more than happy to get off of it, and I never looked back. Um, that's what I've got for you guys as far as employment. Um, like I said, this is like my third take of this video. I pray to God that this records this time. But I feel like I've honed my speech now, having practiced it at least twice. But that is my employment story. That is my journey. Some pretty good stuff in the beginning, got a lot of experience, went through a really bad period for a while, dug myself out of the hole. And now, like I said, I am very thankful to be where I am, especially like, with all in technology now, every other day you're hearing about technology layoffs and businesses and executives. Basically, they need their millions and billions of dollars, so they lay off a third or half of their workforce just so they can say that their company made a profit and they can still maintain their billions and millions of dollars. That's a whole other thing that makes me furious. But like during the pandemic and everything, and so many people like losing their jobs and like businesses closing because they couldn't, keep their business open because of the everything closing down and quarantine and everything. Um, I am extremely thankful to be where I am. I'm thankful to have a good home, the jobs that I do, being able to support myself, in spite of what people perceive of my disability. I'm still able to do everything I'm able to do. Like I said, not only was I able to support myself, but a couple years ago when I had a girlfriend and she was going through some rough stuff, at least financially, like I was able to help her. When she lived with me for a while, I was able to support both of us. And I'm very thankful, and like I said, I do take a little bit of pride in that because so many other people aren't that lucky. So that is what I have for you guys about employment. I hope that just hearing about some of my experiences, what I did to try to combat and fix things, maybe you can try some of that for yourself and it'll help you. Just some of the stuff I've learned over the years. Hopefully it helps. If I can help somebody out there with this video, awesome. Hope it does. So with that, we're going to wrap it up here. And I'm going to again pray that this thing actually recorded and OBS didn't crash on me again. Hope the video helped, and I hope you guys found it helpful. Give it a like if you did. Share it. Hope you guys are enjoying this series so far. Follow me on Twitter at BGFH79, twitch.tv/IllegallySighted, IllegallySighted.com, and right here on YouTube. Until next time, I will chat with everybody again later.